Believe in Kentucky, Believe Podcast Network. He is Cole Park. I am Vinny Hardy, bringing you one of the last few episodes before we have actual games to talk about. Cole, you gonna make it, man. We're gonna get there.
We're so close. We're so close. This week is what UK considers the last week of fall camp. Next week's officially like gearing up for the season with the game on Saturday. It's officially game week. So fall camp ends this week. Tomorrow is our last media opportunity of fall camp with the defense, and then we'll be in game week form. We'll be talking about Toledo, talking about positions, depth chart. It's going to be exciting, and I'm ready to get to it.
That's it. Chomping at the bit, and it is almost that time. So, like, we're looking forward to the season starting. You've been talking with coordinators, you've been talking with players. The grind to camp is almost behind them. Bush hammed them with a little bit of, interesting stuff, and Stoops too after the scrimmage. Your thoughts? We're reading too much into it. Will we have a QB controversy? Is it a if? Is it a when? Is it a matter of time? And how would the staff handle it? The fan base gets behind maybe wanting the Kentucky kid, as you can already see that happening. Should things get neck and neck throughout the season, or should Calzada struggle? Your thoughts, man. Your thoughts, Cole. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually talking that day on an appearance I made for a show about how I'm pretty certain that Calzada's the guy. He's going to be the starting guy week one most likely. They're going to ride with Calzada. This is kind of his team right now. And then that day, Stoops goes to the thing in Louisville and says the thing about Cutter, and it kind of blew up. Everyone on social media is going crazy about it. People are reading a ton into it. And to be honest with you, for me personally, I don't have the life experience that a lot of Kentucky fans have, but Mark Stoops, I've seen his entire tenure at Kentucky. I've seen the last few years at Kentucky, and I feel like I'm living in Groundhog Day. I'm not reading too much into these Cutter Bully comments because, a guy like me, I remember when Joey Gatewood was battling Will Levis, and how did that go? Did we see Joey Gatewood play for Kentucky football? No, we did not. Not in a meaningful way over Will Levis. I think that you say these things, and it, we talked to Bush on Tuesday, and he was a bit more careful, I guess, with some of his comments. And I think a lot of what it really boils down to is you had the second scrimmage last Saturday, and from what I've heard, what I've gathered, Cutter Bully looked great. He was making great plays out there. He was doing what he needed to do. He was really, really reliable. Maybe there was a few plays. I don't know this for sure. Maybe there's a few plays where Zach maybe didn't make the right read, or people, they liked what they saw from Cutter more in this scrimmage. So they're, it's kind of like a roller coaster, the same way you feel about anyone in your daily life. Some days you're high on people. Some days you're like, it is what it is. So I think they were running a little bit of the Cutter Bully high. They want to build up some hype. They know, like you said, Kentucky fans are really, really excited for Cutter Bully right now. But I'm not reading too much into it. When the week one depth chart comes out, I'm expecting to see Zach Calzada right up there at the top. I'm expecting that to stay that way unless he is playing poorly or has some kind of injury a la Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway at Florida last year, maybe, and all it takes is one game. That's what happened with DJ Lagway. It only took one game, not even against a really quality opponent for that matter.
Yeah.
Everyone bought into the DJ Lagway hype, and you kind of were forced to play those two quarterbacks. And then, I don't want to say you got lucky because it's unfortunate when this happens, but you kind of, as a coaching side, in terms of pleasing the media, you almost luck out a little bit that Mertz goes down with a season-ending injury, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. You can just be like, well, Lagway's the guy now, so we don't have to do this week to week anymore. But, I just think that I think Cutter Bully has a lot of potential, and I think that I don't know how this season is going to go for Kentucky football if Zach Calzada struggles a little bit, if he's not really doing what he needs to be doing, or something were to happen, God forbid. I'm not going to wish that on anybody, but it wouldn't shock me if Cutter Bully gets to see the field quite a bit this season. But someone asked Bush about his time at Boise State when they were using two quarterbacks pretty consistently. And he pretty bluntly said, no, I don't see us doing that. It's not, we're not going to use a two quarterback system right now. And there's a quote that I saw floating around that when you got 2 starting quarterbacks, you basically have 0 starting quarterbacks. That's how it goes sometimes. So I still think Zach Calzada's the guy. I still think they're riding with Zach Calzada going into week 1, probably going into Ole Miss week. But it would not shock me if Cutter has, made quite a bit of strides in this last offseason, made a lot of growth and, getting more comfortable. He was doing some reps with the first team there in the scrimmage and is really coming into his own. I mean, even in that press conference, Stoops said that. No one is denying that Cutter Boley is expected to be the future of Kentucky football. This guy that you want to be your next starting quarterback, whether that's this season, next season, or whenever. He is the guy you want to be the next starting quarterback. When is the question? That is the question. When does it become his turn? But as people have pointed out, I think Kentucky's going to play who their best quarterback is. If Zach Calzada starts struggling, I wouldn't be shocked if they put in Cutter Boley, but also, simply put, you don't bring in Zach Calzada from the transfer portal to not start him. You don't go get that guy if you're not planning on using him, So I'm expecting Zach Calzada to still be the starter. It is interesting. I'm not trying to read too much into it because the Joey Gatewood thing still swings in my brain and hate it. Just, but
what a time.
It is interesting though, and it's something to keep an eye on as the season goes on, and especially if play isn't quite where it needs to be this season, there's going to start being a lot of people saying, all right, well, throw Cutter out there. What, you can't do any worse, right? So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how much Cutter Boley plays this year, how he looks when he does that, and I think most importantly for Cutter, how consistent he is. Because I've seen in practices, and I've heard from coaches and other practices that I wasn't allowed to go to, he can make big plays. I've seen some with my own eyes. He's capable of doing it. Can he do it consistently? Can he make the right reads consistently? Can he keep his head under pressure when he's scrambling? Because even with the best offensive line, there's going to be times where you have to scramble. Can he make the right play in high pressure situations on a consistent basis? And if he can, then I'm all for it. Throw him out there. If he's ready, he's ready. But if he's not ready, you still have Zach Calzada. You brought him in to start. He's a veteran guy. He might not be the flashiest at all times, but you're expecting him to be your kind of more reliable quarterback. Let Cutter develop until he is ready. You don't want to destroy that confidence and kind of push him into the ground before he even has a chance to fly.
Just however it shakes out, maybe it gets really interesting. Maybe it gets really, really close. Maybe it's really a thin line as to what they should do. Maybe they no doubt they played all scenarios out in their minds as to how it could go. But whatever it is, make a decision. Don't waver. Stick with it. You're going to get all the outside noise and people clamoring and feeling how they feel, but how they handle it, however it goes, it's make or break. If they get in a situation and don't know how to handle it or mishandle it, that could cause stuff to go, sideways and get squirrely. They're handling however it happens, how dicey it gets. Maybe it gets really interesting immediately. First quarter, second quarter. Everything you said, we just revisited all the Lagway merch stuff on any given Saturday. We just saw that replay with the injury. He gets concussed and then he hurts his knee and then he's done. And like you said, we don't want to speak any of that into existence at all. But however they handle it, it's it'll go a long way.
The real tough part is, there's a saying that if you're a coach and all you do is listen to the fans, well, pretty soon you'll be sitting with them. But at the same time, Kentucky is in a situation now, and I'm not going to deny that a large part of it, regardless of how good he is because Cutter Boley is a Kentucky kid from right around here. That plays a major factor. We have to acknowledge that. But nonetheless, you're going into a season knowing the first time there's a bad play from Zach Calzada, people are going to be saying Cutter Boley, put him in. Yeah. Or even if he's playing fine, just relatively uninspiring sometimes, people are going to say, why don't we see Cutter? Why don't we see Cutter? You're playing early in the season. You've got, I think Eastern Michigan, you're Toledo. People are going to say, why are we not seeing Cutter in these games? Why are we, it's going to be a talking point every single week of the season.
Yeah. And football speaking, Zach is old as dirt, so he's got to know that. He's got to, be veteran enough to know that, hey, yeah, I'm not the local kid that grew up right here in the backyard, and surely, that he's factored that in and knows that, that's part of the competition too. He's been around, so this is just part of it, and he knew what he was signing up for. He knew who was on the roster when he agreed to come to Kentucky. So that's just so many dynamics of this and how it all plays out. We'll find out very soon, but it's going to be interesting.
You got the give and the take. Cutter Bully's the hometown kid. He's the hero. He's the future. Zach Calzada beat Alabama. So, yeah, you got to weigh him. But you said there's something about, Zach in football terms, he's old as dirt. That's actually a little bit funny to me, talking to the offensive coaches on Tuesday. Age was something we heard quite a bit, and players getting called old by college standards was actually a pretty big talking point. And that was, we got to speak to special teams coordinator, but more importantly for the topic at hand, running backs coach Jay Boulware. And he was speaking about, I put out a piece for the Cat's Paws talking about how throughout this fall camp, we've been told, Seth McGowan in a walking boot. You had Dante Dowdell not playing in the last scrimmage. Stoops came out and straight up said, Dante did not play in that scrimmage. Talking to Jay, talking to Bush, Kentucky doesn't really care that much about that. And I thought it was interesting some of the reasons they touched on. So Jay had a pretty funny quote that I put in the story, and it's what you said reminded me of. He said, Seth, he's old. He's an old football player. He said, how many times do you need to take him down to the ground before you stop asking, can he do it? We know he can do it. We know what he's capable of. We've seen 3-4 years of film on the guy. We know that he can run the football. And Bush Hammond kind of echoed that point too. He said you have to differentiate between guys who are new to Kentucky and new to running the football in college. Because new to Kentucky, once you get the plays down, once you get familiar with your offensive line, you know what you're doing. You got the fundamentals down, whereas right now you want to establish more depth, get some of those Pattersons, your Wilcoxes, getting those guys more reps and getting them more comfortable in the system so you have that depth. But something that Boulware touched on that really stuck out to me that I included in the piece is everyone knows that last year was a disaster for Kentucky football. And a big part of that was just across the board the offense, right? We can talk about Brock Vandegrift, we can talk about the offensive line, but the running back room wasn't great either. And that's not because of Demi Sumo Karngbe. He gave it everything he had, but there was a very important thing that I feel like gets left out in a lot of people's discussions about last year, and that's something Jay Boulware talked about. He said, right now we're prioritizing. We know that Dante and Seth can get it done. We know what they're capable of doing. We've watched them, and we have worked with them. And we have seen them at Kentucky, just not in the scrimmages. Right now, it's about keeping those guys healthy, keeping them ready to go. They're going to take hits during the season. We want them to get to the season. And he was pretty candid about it. He said, you look around the country and you see teams that are having guys go down. And last year for us, we had a guy that we planned to lean on. We had a guy that we were expected to use highly go down, and we couldn't use him. Obviously referring to Chip Trayanum, who broke his hand in fall camp. And then at the end of the day, this guy coming over from Ohio State played 3 games in Kentucky Blue and is now in Toledo, going to be coming back to Lexington week 1 on the other side. But he's pretty candid about that. He's like, last year we tried to run him pretty hard and it kind of bit us a little bit. He said we had a guy we were planning to lean on. I'll pull up the quote here, actually. He said, obviously we had a situation last year where we lost a guy that we were counting on, and we lost him for most of the year. And that's an unfortunate truth. I'm not going to say that that's why Kentucky was bad last year. It was Chip, but it didn't help, right? It doesn't help when you don't have that depth. And we can say now with the benefit of hindsight, it was good that Patterson and Wilcox got to have some of those reps, but ideally if you're Kentucky, they wouldn't have got those reps last year. It's helping you now that they've played a little bit more, that they kind of know what they're doing. But in a perfect world, they would have been on the bench, they shouldn't have needed to play. But they did because Chip goes down. Kentucky's kind of left in a bad situation, and they're very much so prioritizing not letting that happen again.
Yeah, trying have usable depth
Yes.
where, not just like you said,
Yeah,
guys
that
on the
doesn't help
bench.
if they're all on the injured list, right?
That's right. Or if you got them, but they're not developed enough to where you feel confident in putting them out there. That whole thing. And same thing on the basketball side. And I've said it forever. And we'll get to that too. But I think we're gonna see it. We saw it last year with Mark Hope, and based on what we're hearing this year, we're gonna see it even more. You have depth, use it. You got guys, 10 guys that can hoop, play them. I'm not never been a fan of just whittling your rotation down to 5 or 6 or 7 just because that's what you want to do. When you got 3 or 4 dudes over there that can hoop, they add more versatility to your roster. And we'll get to the basketball. It looks like there's going to be a lot of guys that are capable, based on what we're hearing, based on track record coming in, based on progress and year 2 in the system, combination of all the above. But it just made me think of this question too. Who had a more impactful return to Lexington? Chip Trayanum or Travis Perry? These guys will be coming back.
Ooh.
A little poll out there on our Twitter account. Believe in Kentucky. Y'all follow us. Who had a more impactful return to Lexington?
I got my answer. I'm going to go. I think it's got to be Travis Perry, right? I mean, this is a Kentucky kid, a Mr. Kentucky basketball who, could have left when Cal leaves, chooses to stay committed to Kentucky, comes back year 1, and then said, I spoke to him. I spoke to him after the loss to Tennessee. He pretty much seemed to indicate, yeah, I'll be back next year. And, I'm not faulting the guy. I know Kentucky went out in the portal. He got kind of recruited over. He saw the writing on the wall that he was not going to have the minutes he wanted to have this year at Kentucky, and that's just a fact. I'm not faulting the guy for leaving. I'm just saying a guy that people were excited about, a guy people had high hopes for, especially after everything with Reed Sheppard the year prior, doesn't quite live up to the Reed Sheppard hype. He was kind of forced into some roles a few times there. We saw him play a lot at Texas. Not really good for his resume with how that game ended per se, but with injuries, like you said, with the depth there, kind of forced him to play before he was really ready to. But a guy that's a Kentucky kid goes to an SEC school that recruited him in the first place, admittedly. That's why he went to Ole Miss. He knew Chris Beard from his recruitment. But come back basketball here, probably a large role they would have had here, probably in a pretty sizable role. Whereas Chip, I feel like it's going to be interesting. It's going to add an interesting little twist to a game against Toledo that already is interesting because Toledo is a very good non-power conference school, could win their conference this year. I just feel like for the general Kentucky fan, they're going to care that Chip Trayanum's back. But Travis Perry was kind of like the same way we were just talking about Cutter with him being a Kentucky kid, a cult hero around here. People love Travis Perry. They wanted to see Travis Perry, and Chip got the injury. People were excited about him, but he got the injury, only ended up playing 3 games in Lexington, and then he's out to Toledo. If you want to be completely honest with you, I think there's a lot of Kentucky fans that don't even know he's at Toledo right now. So I think most Kentucky fans know Travis Perry is at Ole Miss, and they're ready for them to come back. I think a lot of Kentucky fans don't necessarily know that Chip is playing for Toledo. They know he left. They just don't necessarily know where he went.
So between the lines, we talked, all we heard is motivated Mark Stoops. It might be a motivated Trip Trayanum up there in Toledo.
If we have the Toledo football version of last year's Arkansas basketball, I'm gonna be sick to my stomach. I'm gonna be sick to my stomach.
I wouldn't even. And look, it's on paper it's possible. I mean, you see Kentucky ranked 70, you see Toledo ranked 71, you see them picked to win the MAC. We talked 3 weeks ago or so. If this is a close game in the 4th quarter, we wouldn't be shocked. We talked about all that. I'm just on the stat sheet, whose impact will be bigger? I get it, Travis being from here and all that. Fan favorite.
I think that Chip will probably have a big impact.
I think Chip will have a bigger game than Travis will coming back.
Yeah. I just know, you touch on that. I'm not going to wish it into existence. Just being a superstitious sports guy, you saw Kentucky come into Rupp Arena or Arkansas come into Rupp Arena last year. All the former Cats put up good games, ended up beating Kentucky. So help me if I see Chip Trayanum have a Ray Davis versus Florida.
Oh my God,
400 yards, multiple touchdowns, and it ends up being like a 28-26 game. Toledo wins.
Oh,
I might not even go to the presser. I might just leave. I might just leave the stadium and be like, you know what, Vinny, you called it. Yeah, that's how it goes.
if
But
Chip runs it down our throats, man. Oh my God,
man.
cold, man. CPs. Okay, Chip having a Ray Davis game or Travis hitting like 8 threes, going Chris Lofton on his.
I don't know which was.
I mean, he's Beard's boy. You know they're gonna be running stuff for him. They're gonna be trying to get him off. So I mean,
Beard's gonna try to get him his in that game for sure.
It's crazy.
I don't want to say funny because I know like there's Kentucky fans out there, but like if you're able to remove yourself from the situation, like imagine you're a neutral third party fan watching it. I don't know which would be funnier to see. The same way, because you got to know you're part of Kentucky, you're part of BBN, but the same way we laugh at other fan bases when stuff goes wrong, people are going to laugh at Kentucky for the same thing. And for an outside fan, I don't know which of those two scenarios would be funnier. But man, I hope neither of them happen because that would be, I mean, it'd give me something to write about for sure. I would have a lot of content there, but it would just be like, that's one of those ones you're just like, oh man, come on. It can't go on like this, can it?
That's true, man. Just for the whole Schadenfreude situation, that would be, if you could remove ourselves and just, man, just throwing it out there. I threw a little poll out there. We'll see what fans want to think about it. Because, I mean, both could happen. We hope neither happens. But, you've seen Kentucky football. You missed a lot of the bad. You've seen Stoops' entire tenure that started bad. But the years before, the whole,
grew up with a lot of the bad. Didn't really come with a lot of the bad, but I grew up with the bad.
Right. So you grew up with if there's a way to lose a game, Kentucky football will find a way. You've seen enough of that, all those losses to Tennessee when the streak should have ended, the Bluegrass Miracle, stuff like that. You've seen enough of that. So, man, it's crazy.
I'm also well read. I pride myself on that. I've got a massive book collection over here. You can't see it; it's off camera, but I've got a big old bookshelf. I buy so many books. I go to half price books even when I got like 20 on my waiting list, and I'll buy more. I don't care. I like to read a lot of Kentucky books right now. Reading one about from Russell Rice, Big Blue Nation, Kentucky Basketball's Native Sons and Daughters, talking about the history of Kentucky basketball and more importantly focusing on specifically players from Kentucky that played for Kentucky. I got a couple here from Coach P, Rick Pitino's books. I got Calipari's book over here. I've got The Last Great Game, the Duke-Kentucky rivalry history there. I've got a bunch of books I love reading on history. So I know. I also read, also hate to tell you, I read, bought this one at the College Football Hall of Fame. Let me grab this for you here. Got this one here. Saban, grab this one. Read this full book, talks about that LSU Kentucky game. You know the one. The one that fans are on the goalposts. I don't know why.
Guy Morris already had Gatorade on him. We don't know why. All that.
I also read Mike Leach's autobiography, and he touches on his time at Kentucky there with the air raid and Hal Mummy. So I know my history.
No doubt. So man, we'll know in a few weeks. But Trayanum coming back and Travis Perry coming back. One will be a lot more publicized than the other, but hopefully the Trayanum can be nondescript and not very impactful. But they're gonna try to get him off too. And he's going to a good team, and he's trying to get last year out of his mouth as well as Kentucky. So it's gonna be a fun dynamic for sure. So QB controversy, handle it right, impactful former Cats returning football and basketball.
Really just one more thing football-wise. The last real thing of interest that I got on Tuesday that I wanted to speak on before we can move over to basketball a little bit, unless you have more on football, of course. The last real thing I got for football, Talked with Kendrick Law. He touched on it was a minor thing that kept him out of fan day and open practice, but he's all good to go now. He's excited for his role. Also, weirdly enough, Kentucky's been very cagey about announcing its depth chart. It's been very cagey about saying, like, we're expecting this guy to start. Kendrick kind of just came out and said, yeah, I'm expecting to be the kick returner on August 30th against Illinois. So he said, I'm used to returning kicks. Punts are a little bit more annoying than kicks, but I'm used to doing both, and I'm ready to do it on August 30th. So there you go. You want a depth chart piece, Kentucky fans? Kendrick Law, kick returner. Jamori Mack, back up. There we go.
Cole Park, catspaws.com. There you go. And more stories to come as we continue to get closer. The biggest news, especially on the basketball side, we had a legend call it a career. Seemed like it was just yesterday that he was committed to Kentucky. That was way back in 2009. Talking about none other than John Wall, who was the catalyst for the turnaround, for Kentucky being relevant. Things were a little lean. Things weren't great. Tubby's tenure ended kind of mid, and him going to Minnesota. Billy G's 2 years. Everybody knows how that went. And so, Kentucky was on some hard times. Cal comes in, Boogie, John Wall follow him. And I was at work, living down here in Tennessee. Talked about this earlier. I worked with a guy named Gary Froman. He's from Northern Kentucky, in Campbell County. And this is iHeart. You can't even really get Kentucky sports shows. So, I'm listening to like Knoxville radio. I know more about Tennessee's roster than I do Kentucky's. You get like Knoxville radio, Jim Rome, more local radio. But one of the shows in Knoxville, in the course of their show, said, and John Wall has committed to Kentucky. And it sounded like they were at a funeral. They were so sad because I think in their heart of hearts, they knew Kentucky was about to be back. Like the days of just kicking Kentucky while they're down are about to end, and they ended quickly. That year was, the whole One and Fun book with Aaron Torres that whole year. Boom. They won, 18, 19 in a row. They're back. They're ranked. There's a number beside their name like it should be. And Kentucky is cooler than they have ever been, and John Wall should get all the credit for that.
Absolutely. I mean, John Wall, I think one of the very first episodes I ever did of this show with you, we talked about, when North Carolina was interested in the SEC, and we talked about the 6 biggest wins that I ranked. And I touched on it in that story, but people forget because of how it ended and maybe their personal biases towards Arkansas now, how special it was when John Calipari arrived in Lexington, especially after the Billy G years, end of, the era before that. And it felt like Kentucky was back again. And part of that was John Calipari, the aura he carried with him, the way he brought in the talent. But part of that was John Wall. John Wall was so special. And I wrote about one of his games in that piece, the December 5th, 2009, where he's out there and goes down with I think cramps or something like that, and has to go out of the game. North Carolina starts to come back. He comes back out and hits the dagger. And all Roy Williams really has to say after the game is, thought we played pretty well when John Wall wasn't playing, And that was obviously one that was really personal for Wall. He had been a North Carolina fan growing up. I mean, he's just such a special kind of player. And I know I'm biased because that was my growing up, seeing John Wall, doing the John Wall dance in school, like seeing that revitalization of Kentucky basketball. So I'm biased. I'll admit that. John Wall was a big part of my life as a kid, loved John Wall, loved 6'4" from Kentucky. Welcome to Houston, John Wall. Him doing that little dance. I love John Wall, and he's been in the NBA for most of my sports fan life at this point. So it's tough to see him go, but just such a special kind of player. And I'm biased to the fact that, I know there's players, it's a hard thing to do at a school like Kentucky. There's players who maybe you could argue, technically they accomplish more. Put John Wall's jersey in the rafters. I want to see it. I want to see Wall up there in the rafters, and I think he deserves it. Are there other guys who also deserve it? Yeah, sure. John Wall's one of them. And I want to see John Wall in the Raptors in Rupp Arena. Truly, truly a special Kentucky basketball player, a massive part in bringing Kentucky back to being Kentucky again after a time when it felt like it wasn't. And some people thought it might not be again. Yeah. You know, the same people are talking about Indiana or talking about UCLA. They're like, their time has passed. People forget. People were talking about Kentucky like that too. People were saying, Kentucky's time has passed. They were good. Now they're not. Yeah. And John Wall helped bring them back to that. You know, he helped lay the foundation of the Calipari era that led to the 2012 national title and should have led to more, but that's neither here nor there. But, you know, played in the NBA for several teams. You know, he was a Wizard, he was a Rocket, he was, you know, a few places, but just a special kind of player and one who, to me personally, played a big role in my life as a sports fan, you know, falling in love with Kentucky again and watching him in the NBA, having that guy that, you know, it doesn't matter what game you put on. If you hear John Wall, you're like, I know John Wall. I know I'm gonna have a good time watching John Wall.
Yeah. And this, I think a lot of people talk about it, and the fact that, you know, the delay and the dragging of the feet when it comes to retiring jerseys. Like, Tony Delk hosted this podcast with me for the first year. He's the last jersey that's been put up in the Raptors. I mean, you know, the late great Mike Pratt, you know, and maybe Mr. Kitely and things like that. But as far as like a guy that actually hooped, Tony was a senior at Kentucky when I was a senior in high school. This 96. We're talking about 3 decades, and you know, you've had Tayshaun Prince and Keith Bogans, who probably deserve to be up there. John Wall was Player of the Year. Anthony Davis, Player of the Year. You had, you know, Oscar Tshiebwe, Player of the Year. Willie Cauley-Stein, All-American. Guys that have done some
consensus
stuff.
National Player of the Year. Complete.
So we need to kind of speed this up. And now you're getting to the one and done guys. AD is like 32. He's his you know,
doesn't have that many years left.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dallas Mavericks fans. He doesn't have that many years left.
So what are we waiting on? Because now there's this big log jam because we've gone 3 decades without doing anything, and you know, Wall is deserving of anybody to be up there. Who I was listening to today, might have been Bleach Report. You know, you're on there every week. I think he was talking to like Dickie Beal was a point guard before my time. I remember Roger Harden had him on here a couple times. He was like the first point guard I remember. Sam Bowie and those guys, but I don't remember Dickie. I'm like probably 5 or 6 when Dickie was playing, so I don't remember him. But apparently he was really fast with the ball in his hands. And I think they asked Dickie if it was you and Wall and Fox and this guy and this guy and this guy. In the end, who's going to win? And Dickie Bill was like, John Wall's winning that, man. I said, I was fast, but John Wall was winning. That everybody knows him for that. You know, the dance, the speed. You know, Miami, Ohio, he comes in and hits the game winner. It was a struggle when it shouldn't have been, but he came through and saved the day. Duncan left-handed when he was right-handed. The athleticism, you know, the total package. Bringing Kentucky back, like you said, that year it ended against West Virginia. That was a sour note, but that whole year overall, in totality, it was a fun year. You know, Kentucky made it to the Elite Eight, been to more Elite Eights than anybody in the history of the game. We hadn't sniffed anything like that the past 2 years with Billy G, and like the Tubby stuff had gotten stale with him too. So, like you mentioned, the whole revitalization, and you know, Boogie was good too, but Wall, the charisma, the whole total package, that year was really special, and he was right at the core of it all, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, man. I mean, it's such a long career that there's so much to say that I don't even know what to say about it. But, you know, John Wall is a special Kentucky basketball player, made Kentucky feel like Kentucky again, made people believe again after Billy G. And, you know, very happy for him starting his career as an analyst.
Yes.
Exciting to see that. Very excited that he's not going to Arkansas. You know, he put out La Familia always in response to his tweet. Nice to see that. Still showing love to Kentucky. John Wall, expecting, very excited to see what he does as an analyst. And as always, as he was with a player, sky's the limit. By the end of his career there, I don't think he'd really been playing much before his actual official announcement of his retirement. I think his legs were pretty in bad shape by that point, but just a really great player, and really, really excited to see what's next for him. And it's going to always be fun to look back on his Kentucky tenure and his NBA career too, for that matter. Is just one of those players that, in a way that only sports players can, one of those players that you will never forget.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned it. Like on Prime, he's going to be an analyst, so he'd be you can see the insights and dropping knowledge this upcoming season. So that's cool as well. Sticking with basketball too, man. A lot of people probably, Big Blue Nation finds everything. Matt Norlander was probably thankful with all the hits to his podcast because he had Mark Pope on there the other day. Jelavic is finally back in the States from Croatia. I'm interested to see because, with Jaden Quaintance, I don't think they're going to rush him along. We all want to see him healthy and ready later rather than sooner, even though you're playing Louisville and all that early in the year. Everybody rather see him in November, December, January, February, March. Don't rush him back now. But I want to see how they do. Yelovich, maybe even Reese Potter. I don't know. These bigs in the Louisville game. Will it be a big by committee? How will they do that? Because your main rock as a big is probably not going to be there. So I'm just curious to see how they implement those guys, especially with such it's the Louisville game. It's life or death, and this game is about to be played earlier than it's been since.
It might be really good this year too. I mean,
you haven't played them this early since 1983 when you played them the first time. So I'm just curious to see how he uses the bigs for that game until you get Quaintance fully back.
Yeah, I mean, in that episode, I wrote a couple stories on that episode, and Chris Fisher from 24/7 did quite a bit more as well. But he talked about Quaintance and his injury, and really, really emphasized the physical way he plays and making sure that you're not rushing him back into anything, making sure that you're taking your time with Jaden Quaintance because he needs to be fully healthy just the way he plays. Preferably also keep him off the road based on what we're hearing about his driving test. But, but you also have that, fingers crossed everything's good with Jelavic. He's here now. It's very exciting to see that. I think some Kentucky fans are really worried after everything that happened with Big Z just a few years ago. They're like, just let it be okay with this one. You got Brandon Garrison coming back. You got Malachi Marino, who is expected to, have NBA upside, according to Mark Pope. So it's going to be so fascinating to see how those bigs are used and who's used in what spot there. No offense to Reese Potter. I'm going to leave him out of this conversation. Lexington kid, but
7 foot, so I just threw him in there.
Yeah,
I got you.
But I'm excited to see, when you have some of these guys, who's going to get a lot of those minutes, who's going to maybe shift over to the 4 sometimes, who's going to play predominantly 5. How are we going to see this team shake up, and what kind of lineups is this going to give us until Quaintance comes back? We don't know when that'll be, but then once you do have him back, how are these minutes going to be distributed? You don't want to have, and it's something I think a lot of people were worried about with Kentucky at first when they finished the portal hole. You're excited, but you're also worried, do we have too much talent? How are we going to manage this, and how are we going to divide up these minutes? How are we going to see these guys? Are we going to have a full team platoon going on here? I don't know, but I'm fascinated to see, and I'm really, really excited for the potential this Kentucky basketball team has going into this season, and to see how some of these guys are gonna really fill the roles that they're going to be asked to play.
And to that point, like I said, if you got depth, use it. If you got more guys that are better and further along than you thought, well, that's a good problem to have. But he mentioned that Trent Noah, in his own words, was a disaster last year, the first few weeks, as far as know what to do coming in as a freshman. Now he's one of the most veteran guys in year two, as far as comfortable in the system, doing this and making shots, and stepping in to probably, if he keeps it up, making himself available to grab more minutes. So it's a good problem to have. Maybe they didn't anticipate, some guy, Colin Chandler, by all accounts, is going to be a lot better. Oway, of course, is, all these returners, Garrison, then you bring in the veterans from other places, Lowe and Diabate and DA. So, man, it's a great accumulation of talent. It's going to be fun to see how he puts it all together. And again, it's a good problem to have. It's better to have that than, man, we have no wing players that can score or defend. What are we going to do? No, you got adequate solutions in different types of games and versatile pieces to put together. So that's why he's who he is. He's a smart dude, and he's up for the challenge, and it's going to be fun to see how he puts it all together.
Absolutely. I'm very excited. And it's a lot of those reasons that I said earlier. I don't fault Travis Perry for leaving. The writing was on the wall with this team and respect to Trent Noah for staying, because I don't know the kind of role Trent Noah is going to have on this team. I don't know the kind of role Reese Potter is going to have on this team. And, there's a couple of those guys that I'm like, when you look at who's out there, where are you slotting in? And I don't know, maybe they've taken some strides. Maybe we're going to see a lot. Trent Noah's obviously got that lethal shot of his. Potter could be a guy who could really develop into something special, but it's going to be fascinating to see how the minutes shake out across the board. Who's playing where? Who's the starters? Do we have consistent starters? Are we kind of one of those teams that has guys they plug in every like? Are we going to have game-based starters? Are we going to have season starters? Like, who knows? And there's a lot of potential with this team, and like you said, I would say it's a good problem to have more talent than less talent. But it's still a problem, and that's in how you manage that, how you deal with dividing up those minutes, and more importantly, how you keep those guys happy. Because it's not just about the transfer portal anymore either, too. You want to keep them staying in Lexington if they're not going pro, but also a guy who's not happy, a guy who's not committed to a team who feels like he's not being used is not playing his best basketball either. So it's not like it's just a problem that's going to hurt you in the offseason and we'll just load back up in the portal. That can hurt you during the season if you're mismanaging some of these guys and these guys aren't happy with the roles they're playing. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how Kentucky shakes out in that regard and how it all comes to be when the season starts and you got Louisville playing at Louisville early on.
And you talk about the portal and mismanaging. He was pretty candid. He kind of thought that he I think mismanaged the part where they, you're in the tournament and you're also already getting commitments and stuff like that. I think he talks like he's going to kind of reevaluate that going into next year. Because you had the Cam Williams thing, and you're trying to evaluate, and you're trying to, you're in the Sweet 16 for crying out loud. So you're trying to juggle that, which has been insane for coaching staff. But they're looking to kind of tweak, to use the Calism, to tweak that going forward for how they handle it next year and in future years.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, and I respect Pope for being pretty honest about that they feel like they didn't manage the portal as well as they should have when they were focused on the Sweet 16. Understandable. You're in the NCAA tournament. But, those guys, a lot of those big-time guys, coaches and whatnot, they don't want to talk about specifics. They don't want to go into things. But, Pope kind of alluded to a few things, and Norlander alluded to a few things. And if you've been following Kentucky on a deep level, you know what they're talking about. You know that Kentucky missed on Donovan Dent right during that game. He committed elsewhere during that game. Most of what I heard says Kentucky might have been outbid on that they swooped in while Kentucky was taking the floor, and they weren't able to handle that. That was a tough one to lose. Donovan Dent would have been a big get for Kentucky.
No doubt.
We know they wanted to get Taylor Bowen. Didn't get him. We know they were looking at Silas Demery. Didn't get him. He goes to UConn, I believe. So, they've been pretty honest about the fact that they feel like that they missed on a few things. And I'm not saying they missed on all those. Some of those guys that, I think Silas, they were already, they were interested in him, but they might have been backing off a little bit before he went to UConn, that they might have seen that he wasn't going to go to Kentucky. But I know they did want Bowen. I know they did want Dent. And it just didn't quite work out in that way. And you look at Kentucky now, they're fine. They got a very good team. They got what they need. But that's hard. It's Pope kind of came in year one and kind of had to really scramble to put together a roster, kind of getting late to the party and being able to put together a team. And, I'm sure on some level he feels like he kind of did that year two as well. You're focused so much in the NCAA tournament that all these other teams who are out, or simply, if you're Pope, you're a competitive guy and you're always looking to improve. That's just the kind of person he is. Other teams who maybe you feel like were handling it better than you were, if you're admitting that you didn't handle it as well as you could have, all of these other teams are already laying foundations, putting down groundwork, building bridges with some of these players and starting. And then you're Kentucky trying to hop in there and you're a little bit behind. And then that leads to things you see where guys choose elsewhere. And, like I said, Kentucky's fine. It worked out well for them in the end. They got a very good team. But I respect that Mark Pope admitted that there were a few misses this last offseason, because I feel like there's a lot of coaches and especially a lot of fans, it's a common joke that gets thrown out there like, oh, this was a Pat Kelsey whiff. Oh, this was a Mark Pope whiff. They missed on this. They missed on that. A lot of coaches and fans won't admit that their team did miss on something that they wanted. And I feel like I respect that Pope was pretty honest about the fact that, yeah, some of those guys, we did want them and we were trying to get them and we failed to get them. And it might turn out that it worked out for the best. Everything happens for a reason. You might have gotten exactly the guys you needed to get. But, it also helps you learn and grow for future years. Like, all right, I don't like how we approach this. We can change this up. We can focus this, put these resources here, move this coach over here. And it'll be interesting to see how they pursue that in the future.
Yeah, sure. So,
if you're Kentucky, hopefully those deep tournament runs continue. So you're going to have to learn how to deal with the portal during tournament season.
And one way to learn is to look at what you did and see how you can improve. Good that they're not above that. They don't think that, too much themselves that, hey, I can do better here. I can do better. That's, and that's good for all of us, no matter what walk of life we're in.
Yeah, that's
honest, man, reflect.
Yeah, that's I don't want to say he doesn't do it at all, because I've talked to him many times and I know that a lot of fans are harsher on him because of the way things ended. But that was something that people got really tired of with Calipari a lot of times, was a lack of accountability with certain things. He wouldn't admit fault in the way certain things were going a lot of times at the end of his tenure. And I really respect that, and that's not to say John Calipari doesn't ever admit fault. He does. He absolutely does, but there were a couple times where people wanted him to admit fault or to change something that they thought wasn't working, and he would just be pretty stubborn about it. And I have a lot of respect for the fact that Mark Pope is willing to come out in year two already and be like, hey, I messed up. I think I could have done better. I'm still happy with the result, but I think I could have done better, and we're going to try to do that better in the future.
Absolutely. Y'all should have a lot of respect for what Cole Park does at thecatspaws.com. Check his stories out. Follow him on Twitter. Check out the content from the press conferences, talking to offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, offensive players, defensive players. Pretty soon to be depth charts, game recaps, all that going forward if we're going to make it. And we appreciate y'all for taking the time to listen to the show, watch the show, however you consume it. We appreciate it. Rate, review, subscribe, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on X, Twitter. There's the link tree, access to the TikTok, all the accounts. Subscribe and follow and like. We'd appreciate it. Leave us a little comment, leave us a little review, leave us a little 5 stars. We would definitely appreciate it. Cole, another episode. Enjoyed it. Enjoy your content at the Cat's Paws as well. And look forward to being back next week for game week, man.
Absolutely. Excited to get to game week. We've been talking about it for weeks now, but we're almost there. So always happy to be here. Always happy to do another episode of the show, and very excited to get to actual games to talk about.
That's it. The fun is about to start. The grind is almost here. It's for Cole. My name is Vinny Hardy, Cole Park. This is Believe in Kentucky on the Believe Podcast Network. We'll see everybody next week. Go Cats.